So this is the second part of the Movement 1 discussion blogs. So this is the second group of themes that are introduced. And this was one of the first pieces that I wrote for the project. Um, it was one of the very early pieces, certainly. So it's undergone a lot of change since that initial session of writing it. So this part I'm going to show you first is the original idea. It's the sort of original basis, and up until fairly recently that was the piece, until I looked back at my classical form notes and realised that I couldn't use it like that because it's in the same key as the previous video's piece. They were both in a form of D, and obviously classical form dictates that when you're in your first movement, the sonata movement, your first theme is in the home key, your second theme isn't in the home key, and then at the end they both return in the home key. So I had to find a way of changing the piece's key so that when we did revert back in the recapitulation, that it could be in its normal key. So this is sort of the idea that was originally supposed to go in the recapitulation. I believe it has changed slightly since, but yeah, we'll start having a look at that, and then I'll show you what we changed. There's not a lot that we changed. It is mainly just the key and just the amount of layers that we've got. But so this song starts in D major. It's definitely a very major sounding piece. And for this one, I was trying to bring some sort of almost poppy atmosphere to it, combining sort of the progressive sound of a band like Coheed and Cambria, who have indirectly influenced a lot of the pieces in this project. And then as we move on, I start to take influence from bands like Thin Lizzy, in building up guitar harmonies in interesting ways, and really creating like a layer of sound, a wall of sound with different guitar harmonies. So we'll just show you this first little bit. It's all straight 4/4 until there's one section later on that isn't, but I'll talk about that when we get to it. So it's all straight 4/4, 140 BPM in the key of D major. Here we go. So that section there, we start off just with a basic D power chord, and then we move to a sort of sus4 to D major 2-note chord, to add that little bit of flavour. And then we move to the last little section, which is your turnaround, that little bit there. And that's basically the same idea again, just playing a sort of a minor chord to the sus4, back to the minor chord. And the reason I decided to do that was, I think playing chords in that way, where you're hinting at the major and minor sort of colour of them, and integrating that in with your power chords, your fifth chords, which don't really suggest major or minor at all. It's quite a nice way of just subtly suggesting how the listener should feel at this point. I do want to draw attention to the drums quickly. Just see if I've split them down. I have not. So the drums, I wanted a sort of a nice straight feel, just with some ghost notes and accents. So it's not just a really straight dull 4/4. So this stage is quite regular, and then it changes on 106. Moves on to the ride cymbal, more ghost notes are present, and then it reverts back to the original drum beat for the what I'd call the chorus section if it was that sort of a piece. The bass, very simple, which is something that I've tried to do throughout the pieces. Just chugging on that D note and then dropping down to a C. To move with the guitar, when the guitar moves to a C chord. Yeah. And that just gives it a little bit of variation moving to that C chord. Because you can still play that the sus4 to the major shape with the C note in there instead of the D. You can still get that flavour there, and it's really, really tasteful and just interesting to get that different bass note in there. So then when we get to here, this is where the second section comes in, and this is where you'd start to hear the sort of Thin Lizzy elements. It's more present in the repeat when it happens again. So in this section we go for something very, very pentatonic. It's very simple. Major, adding some notes from the major scale in there as well. It's very simple. And we also obviously follow the chords again. The chord progression throughout this whole section is the same. It's D and C. It doesn't change from what would be the verse section to what's the chorus section. All D and C. Sorry about this. We revert back to that first section again, and it's all the same, that section. And then we get to this part, and as you can see, there's a lot of guitar and a lot of stuff going on here. So I'll give you a listen to that. I do apologise about this. So what I'll do, since my laptop is running a bit slow, is I'll isolate the parts. So this is exactly the same, your first guitar part. And as you can see, with all of these other guitar parts, we had harmonies in. So when you build them all up together, we've got some that are playing the same things, some that are playing direct harmonies. And like I said, this was to try and create that Thin Lizzy sound of, songs like The Boys Are Back in Town, where you've just got this thick wall of guitar harmonies that all just blend together so nicely. Specifically, the very end section of The Boys Are Back in Town, where it sort of starts to fade out, but the guitars layer on top of each other. So, I think the reason that I did that was because that melody was so catchy when I first wrote it. I wanted to try and do some more with it and add to it and create more of an atmosphere and make it grander. So what I'll quickly do is we'll highlight each individual harmony line. So in reference to the initial line. So this one's very thin, as you hear. Still quite sort of in the same register. And then we'll add in the second harmony, which is a much higher one. And you'll notice that the tag on the end of them starts to change. So if we add those three in together, so obviously the first track ends like this. With that 6-note run. The first harmony is a much more simplified version, very similar to the first half of the initial track. Harmony number 2. Same rhythmic phrasing as the first harmony part, but different note placements. So you get a different sort of texture from that. And then we add in harmony 3, which is this. And then finally we've got this one, the fourth harmony part, which I believe is the same as the initial one, just 2 octaves higher. With some slight variations. So we add all of those in and you get that big sound. I think it's important to try and spread these harmonies out as well, because there are so many of them, to try and get them to fill the full spectrum of your sort of audio vision. So you can get the flavour of that there. Like I said, the drums is very, very simple through this section. Just playing the same very simple 4/4 beat that it played at the beginning. And then we've also got, this is the other guitar section that's in this part. And my idea behind this was just to add some more width to it. You know, it's a clean part with delay, chorus, and reverb. And it's not supposed to be immediately audible. It's supposed to sit underneath and just add sort of a layer of thickener. which is something that progressive bands do very, very often. Bands like Rush will use this technique a lot. They'll play around with the idea of these open chords with notes that would normally be dissonant. For example, playing the ninth, which an octave down would be a second. But playing on that idea of dissonance, of spreading out that note to the octave above, so it gives more character. So you can hear that when everything's loaded in, when all the tracks are present, you can't really hear it all that much. So if I turn it up a tad, you just get a little bit of the flavour of it. And again, the bass is simple here. Just varying that second note as opposed to the root. Just playing around with the harmony note there, adding the octave in bar 145 at the end there. It's all very simple. Just try to again provide that driving force. And then the final part that I put into this section is the piano. And this was a direct inspiration from a song called The Suffering by Coheed and Cambria, where it's a very similar feel in terms of how the two pieces are constructed. But there are sections in the song where you just hear this really bright, high-pitched piano sound, just stabbing at like two-note chords. So that's what I tried to recreate. And I think what it does is it almost adds a sort of Broadway vibe to it. Sort of that big, loud, positive, over-the-top energy that Broadway sort of is defined by. So again, I know my computer probably won't load it properly, but if we play everything together, and I'll start it without the piano, and then I'll bring it in, and you'll hear how much it just lifts the piece. It's a really powerful effect for something so simple. So as you can tell, when we hit that part where I unmuted the piano, it just lifted the entire piece and gave it so much more life. And that was the whole intention of that track. So then, when we get into bar 156, obviously because the initial piece is first in the track, we get to sort of the interlude section that I've used as a sort of interlude between different sections of the first movement, and we shift from 4/4 here to 7/4, and we also slow down a little bit from 140 BPM to 136. It's a subtle change, but it was something that I thought was important. So here we're moving chromatically, chord-wise, between an F, sort of an F and an E. So I'll just play, and again there's a lot of these dissonant notes in there, extended harmony, to provide a really sort of dark, sinister twist to this really positive piece that you've just been presented. So we'll play the guitar track first. So you can hear that chromatic shift. It's a little bit unsettling, and it's very dark and sinister sounding. And like I said, the reason for that was to have like an immediate juxtaposition to what I'd presented initially, which is again a very progressive rock thing to do. It's also something that classical musicians would do quite a lot. This like big just juxtaposition in style and feel, going from something really triumphant and grand and powerful, then to something that's very small and delicate and more sort of emotional. And that's what I was going for here. So we've quietened down the drums a lot. And I just wanted a drum part that sort of accented the accents of the guitar track. So again, if we play them together, you'll feel where those more accented snare hits come in. And then we bring in a little lead track here. And with the lead track, I wanted something that felt very normal, sort of note placement wise, for the majority of the piece, and then just to add in some notes that make it sound darker, just some, not dissonance as such, but some passing notes that just make it feel a little bit quirky and uneasy. Like here. There's a couple there. Just spread them out, make them sparse, but when they come in, they have an impact. And again there, nice little passing note. Again there. Just to sort of hint at the darker suggestions of the chords, rather than playing within them all the time. So that was the initial piece that I wrote. Obviously, like I said, it was in D, so it didn't technically work with the first section of the first movement. So what I did next, when I realised this and came to that realisation, was I went back and we changed the key to F sharp. So we'll play that very quickly. We've also changed the bass line a little bit, which I'll show you in a second. So it's very simple. I didn't want to change a lot about it at all. I'll just very quickly chat about the bass with you. So we'll try a solo that. So you can hear that initially it chugs along with the root notes, and then it sounds like it's going to move in quite a pentatonic fashion before throwing in a chromatic. But it is subtle when you take the guitars with it. You just get that little suggestion in the background of something more interesting going on. And that was important, to try and not go over the top and go out of my way to make things progressive. To try and be more careful about it and structure things more, especially in a piece like this, where it's very 4/4, it's very simple. To just add something that adds a bit more complexity to it, I guess. And as you'll have seen, when we got to what was the chorus section, we simply added in a rhythm track. Really simple. And then we've only got the one harmony in this one. Like I said, I wanted this one to be more, when it first appears like this in F sharp, I wanted it to be more reserved. So then when the full piece comes in later in the movement, that it feels more real and more exciting. So that's what we've got there with this piece. It repeats again, and then it stops where we would go to the 7/4 section. So that's that piece. And in the next video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you about the final section of the first movement, because essentially the 7/4 section over here, the 7/4 section at this end, is like my development phase. It's the section where we introduce a new theme and we start to play around with ideas a bit more before coming back in with the first theme and this theme. So we'll have a look at that one in the next video. Cheers.